Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Great Shot Kid, the Nerd Party's podcast that is focused on the works of Star Wars creators, both within and without the Star Wars galaxy. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Mike.
And this week we are going to we're going to continue, wrap up our exploration of of some non-Star Wars work from the editors of the original Star Wars. And this week we'll be focusing on the editorial work of Paul Hirsch, and in specific, the work that he did with Brian De Palma in the 1973 film Sisters, starring Margot Kidder. And so let's go ahead and kick things off here, Mike, because I got some thoughts about Sisters. I'd never seen it before. But why don't you go ahead and you give everybody a taste of what Sisters is all about?
Okay. What's the plot
You'd
synopsis?
think for an hour and a half
Sisters?
long movie, it would be a lot easier to go into what this movie's about, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, a man and a woman meet at a television game show, and they hit it off, and they go out on a date and spend the night together, and there's an ex-husband which is involved, and things are somewhat complicated. The woman has a twin sister who may or may not be jealous or something of this new relationship, and the man decides to get a birthday cake for these two twin sisters who are celebrating their birthday, and he goes back to their apartment and gets
Murdered,
stabbed to death.
Yes.
by one of the sisters, and hijinks ensue. That's when it starts to get crazy. So
yes, that's when it starts to get. And the thing is, it's really interesting because they meet on a game show, but there seems to be like a Truman Show style social commentary happening just in the beginning, because this is the era of candid camera, and the way that they meet is he is an unsuspecting person who's in a locker room changing, and there's a wall that's under construction, and then a woman who he believes is blind comes in and starts disrobing. And the game is, will this man do the chivalrous thing and turn around and walk away? And so, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so let's go ahead.
I would love to see like the second episode of that show, because it's like there's only so many scenarios. I mean, they went with the easy one, which is a blind woman walks into the wrong locker room, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, but like how many different scenarios can you come up with which involve like a guy accidentally, looking at something that he's not supposed to look at? You know what I mean? How do you make that a weekly show? That's the bigger question here. I don't know.
It's game show commentary before Running Man even comes out. So it's ahead of the game in those terms. So it's a tough concept. But yeah, let's go ahead. Let's just jump to what is the flashpoint here, because we're looking at the editing in specific. And in the scene that we're talking about, and this is no spoiler, like this guy's going to get killed. Like, okay, first and foremost, it's an early Brian De Palma movie. You're going to have a little bit of body horror, you're going to have murder, and you're going to have identity crises. That's Brian. That's his palette.
Is very much going to be in the vein of Alfred Hitchcock. In this case, Psycho.
It's going to try to be. It's going to try to be in that vein. Yeah.
Like in terms of like structure and everything, it's kind of like a reverse Psycho.
A revert? How so? No, I don't necessarily agree. Walk me through that.
Well, it's a reverse psycho in terms of like the gender roles,
Oh, I see what you're
So
saying. Yes. Okay.
a
Yes, I
guy's
agree.
doing a thing, he's whatever, he goes, to this woman's apartment, and then he gets stabbed to death. And you're like, what? And that's like a big shock because it seems like he's the main character and everything, and then the story picks up from there and it's told from someone else's perspective.
That's okay. No,
And
I got you. I'm tracking with you now. Absolutely. I do see that. But what's so interesting, and you had given me a heads up about this, was the use of split screen at that pivotal moment when he gets killed. The screen splits, and you see two perspectives. You see the perspective of somebody seeing him through a window, and him climbing to the window at the same time, which is jarring. And it's okay. First and foremost, there is definitely a hat tip because it's not used just that one time. A hat tip to Hirsch as the editor, because getting that to work without it seeming out of sync or weird or a cheat is a trick, and it works each time that they do it. So that's a credit to him, I think.
yeah,
In getting
and
things to
and one of
match
the
up
things
right.
which is impressive is it seems like even though it's happening in like two separate buildings, really,
Yeah.
like it looks like just because of the movements and everything and the precision of the movements, it looks like they were shooting both angles at the same time, which is
Right.
pretty cool.
It is. It's very cool.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff like that really helps the movie because this is, I think overall for me watching it, there was very much the feeling of, this is De Palma before he's completely secure in his skills or what he's trying to say or how he's trying to communicate to the audience. But for me, I look at this movie and I see so many different things at play because, it does switch after he gets killed and it tells it from somebody else's perspective. But there is this thing where one of the things that De Palma, especially early De Palma, really gets hammered on is his portrayal of women and, the issues that he seems to be working out with women. But in specific, the person who becomes the hero of the story is female. So there seems to be this. He doesn't seem to treat women differently than men. Do you think that is the way? And what I mean by that is there's no, wilting lily female character in this. These characters are, what people would have expected from any typical male in this sort of role. Do you think that is why people sort of like push back against early De Palma, or do you think that I'm trying to forgive him too much for that?
I think that is definitely a criticism which people have of his earlier work, and I mean you can definitely see it in some stuff like oh god, I just watched it for the first time. What was the one with the guy? I don't want to say what happens in it because it would be like a spoiler, but the one
Dress
with
to Kill?
yes, Dress to
Yeah.
Kill. Yeah. I mean, certainly, there's some stuff in there which, you look at it today and you're like, oh, okay. And there's like a lot of that, going on in his early career in particular, and I guess this movie does seem a bit more progressive in that regard. I think that this movie is dealing with a lot of those issues kind of like head on in ways that his other movies didn't necessarily, also in terms of like issues of race and stuff like that, certainly that comes into play pretty heavily here. And I mean you do see like some gender, roles. I mean there's like the whole thing where the woman who becomes the protagonist towards the end of the movie, seeing her like working with like a private investigator and everything, and
Yeah.
the way that he kind of is dismissive of her and what she's trying to do, and all that stuff, and then not to mention like her mom trying to marry her off, and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, and she's not really having any of that. I don't know. There is like a lot of stuff going on in that regard, and I think for the most part it is handled pretty well. Certainly much better than in your average De Palma film. You know?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the racial thing because there is a like I wouldn't call it a joke, but there's very definitely a comment made because the man, you know, he's African American, and her reward for being on the game show is a set of knives, which, you know, I mean, you know, if you know anything about De Palma, it's, oh, somebody got knife. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, I know how those are going to get
I wonder
used.
if that's going to come into play later on in the movie.
Right. Yeah, very subtle. He's always very subtle. But he's black, and they give him a free dinner at the African room, and there's this beat, and that's what I think is so weird about that scene where the murder happens. Like, is it just that we, you know, having seen De Palma's later work, I mean, would this have caught anybody off guard? Because he gets it, and there's this beat where he sort of like smirks, like, this world is not cool.
Yep.
You know? And so there seems to be like sort of a light comic feel to things, and it's all going. And is it just that because it was De Palma, I knew what was coming, that I was just like, okay, yeah, get to the horrible part. I know the horrible part is coming. Or do you think it actually disarmed audiences at the time?
Well, I mean, I guess it was kind of funny in the way that he finds it funny. You know, the character finds it funny. You know, like he looks at it and he's like, oh, God, seriously, guys, okay, fine. You know, and then you know they go there and everything, but it's, I think at the same time, even though it is funny, it's definitely sort of like, you know, a pretty hard-hitting social commentary that's going on, you know, and that comes into play later on too, where, you know, I mean, she, you know, the woman who witnesses the murder is trying to convince the police of this thing, and you know, she's thinking that the reason why they're not taking it seriously is because of, you know, race and stuff like that, and you know, it's certainly, you know, delving pretty deep into that topic, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if that was necessarily supposed to be disarming, because I mean, there is like a lot of time that passes, but it is kind of, I guess, in a sense, misleading in that, you know, it starts off as sort of like a romance, you know, and then it turns and becomes, and I mean, you really don't know where this movie is going if you don't, you know, look at all of the external things, you know, and sort of the idea that it's a horror movie and everything. I mean, it's a pretty shocking moment when the murder occurs. It's very similar to Psycho in that regard, you know, where Psycho is all about the misdirect, in that it's like, this woman, you know, stole, you know, $40,000, and what's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. Is she going to get away with it? And then all of a sudden, murder, you know, and it's like, whoa, okay, I didn't realize that we were in a horror movie. You know, I thought we were in like some sort of like suspenseful drama.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess that same sort of thing is going on here. I mean, there's some tension, but it feels more like a character drama, and then the murder occurs, and it gear shifts. I mean, this is a gear shift movie to some extent, although that happens pretty early on, you know.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, and calling out Psycho is also, I mean, the way that the stabbing is cut is very effective, especially there, you know, the choice, and I'm sure that part of it was, you know, actor safety and practical effects and those sorts of things, but the decision to show what, like, the, you know, he gets stabbed a couple of times, and then the knife, you know, is stabbed into his face, but it's shown through shadow. Yeah. And so it winds up, I'm sure that there were a lot of practical reasons, but by cutting to that, I found it so much more effective than trying to push the limits of, you know, this is a pre-Tom Savini world. Yeah. You know, this is before people were pushing the envelope for, you know, how realistic, you know, Greg Nicotero could make a head explode on television and stuff like that. Yeah. You know? So it seems that Hirsch exercised some really good judgment in terms of those scenes, and, well, in terms of that scene. But then, the split screen is so fascinating to me, because it's not something that you commonly see used in a film, and it very much contributes to that sense of disorientation that occurs. Now, I'm going to be straight up front about it. I didn't particularly care for this movie, but it sounds like I'm effusive about it. But it's one of those things where I think this is the type of movie you can look at it. You can honestly look at it and say, I didn't necessarily care for the final product, but I see what went into making it. Yeah. And I can see the skill level that was there, that was trying to come through at that point, that was being born at this time, but wasn't quite there, wasn't quite mature enough to come across.
Yeah, this is only the second time that I've seen it. The first time I watched it was in school for a class. I think it was a horror film class or whatever. And I guess I didn't really have any idea what to expect the first time I watched it. And because of that, I was kind of like blown away by it, and there is so much in it which is kind of... I'm not even going to say groundbreaking, because it's not like, people were doing stuff like this after this movie, but it's just so outside of the box that, I found it to be really impressive and surprising and fun and all that stuff. And, I always sort of wanted to go back and watch it at some point, and now this was finally, our chance. And seeing it this time, I think... I'm kind of with you in that I was really sort of impressed by what it was they were doing, but I wasn't completely invested in the movie as a movie, Right. So I mean, I do still think it's very good. I would recommend seeing it, but it doesn't have that replay value that I kind of thought it would. But Hirsch's contribution to this is pretty big and really pretty impressive. I mean, with the split screen stuff like we're talking about, and that murder at the beginning of the movie, very much influenced by Psycho, of course, but there's this whole sort of psychedelic thing which happens at the end of the movie, and the editing in that is really, really solid, and really kind of creates a sense of confusion and everything, but it's so well done that I was extremely impressed. And it is interesting to note that some of the techniques which were developed here were then used by De Palma later on in his career, like the split screen thing, which he tried out here, I believe. He talks about this in the documentary about him, De Palma, which you can find on Amazon Prime, and I highly recommend. He did that as sort of like an experiment here, and he liked it so much that you will see him use that again and again and again throughout his career. And you can even see it, the place that I kind of always think of it as being, done in a very similar fashion, in a very effective, fashion, is in Jackie Brown by Quentin Tarantino. Tarantino has spoken at great length about how much he loves Brian De Palma. De Palma in many ways is his favorite filmmaker. And, you can definitely see the influence.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Even down to there are certain music hits and camera movements that reminded me of because your first thought when you watch Kill Bill Volume 1 is this is straight exploitation movies that he's evoking and those sorts of things. But there were things here in this where I watched it and I said, oh wow, I can actually see Kill Bill in this a little bit. Not because it's like shot for shot or anything, but I'm like, okay, I can see how this whittles its way into, the lizard brain, at the core of Tarantino's film sense, and how it works its way back out in his later movies as he gets more secure in what he's trying to tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't think about that, but yeah, in Kill Bill, towards the beginning, the stuff at the hospital, they have the split screen with the Bernard Herrmann music too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty on the nose when you think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's I mean, Tarantino, everybody knows his stuff and has, is very open about his influences. So I do, yeah. I mean, it's so tough. I mean, again, to echo what you said, and what we're saying is like, this is not the type of movie where you're gonna go back and you're gonna watch it and be like, oh my, wow, why didn't I see this before? This is not a Godfather or a Conversation or a Mean Streets or a Taxi Driver or something like that. This is a young filmmaker making a horror movie, but doing some really interesting stuff with it, including, and I can't let this whole conversation go without saying that the quote unquote ex-husband, Mad Doctor, whatever, looks a lot like a guy I went to school with many years ago. And every time there was a close-up of him, it was extremely unsettling because he'd like talk at the screen. I was like, oh, come on. No, back up, please. So, points to the movie for that, I guess, or possibly I should have been more cautious around the person because maybe they saw this movie and modeled their style after him. I don't know. But,
you never know. You never know.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, you're right. Like he's working a lot of stuff out, and a lot of the stuff that he's doing is very good and works, but a lot of it doesn't. That stuff that doesn't work necessarily, he does kind of abandon and takes what he was developing that was working and makes it work better, refines it, and other things. But, regardless of that, it's still kind of interesting to see him working these things out,
Well, another thing that's weird too is I am not terribly familiar with the work of Margot Kidder outside of Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see her in this type of role was so weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is. It's like the first time that you see, I don't know. It's probably going to be a terrible analogy, but you know what? I've always loved, It's a Wonderful Life. And then you go back and you watch some old films and you see, the forgetful uncle in another movie. And you're like, no, you're supposed to have string around your finger. And so to see her in this is very, and like the decision to make her French was so.
I mean,
unnecessary.
It's weird because she has reached the iconic status that you see in a lot of Star Wars, actors, whether it's Carrie Fisher or Mark Hamill or whoever, where, like you see Margot Kidder, and before you think like that's Margot Kidder, you think that's Lois Lane, So to see her in anything where she's not that, but especially something where she's like, a murderous, woman with a twin sister, whatever, kind of thing. It's very strange. But when you think about the fact that this was before Superman,
right?
Maybe it wasn't that strange. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, people do lots of things. So
sure. I just think that some of the character choices were like it wasn't necessary to have her have a French accent.
Yeah.
So why did you? Like and I will say that something else that is that for any child of the 1980s, if you watch this, you will thoroughly enjoy seeing Barnard Hughes, who was the grandfather from Joel Schumacher's epic The Lost Boys, is in this film, and it's actually disorienting because the whole time I'm watching it, I'm saying, "What? I know that voice, man. What do I know him from?" And I look him up, and I'm like, "Oh, that's right. And now I'm going to go watch The Lost Boys." So, from horror to horror, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's interesting to note too that De Palma, while technically not a Star Wars creator, he definitely did have a very large influence on the original movie.
He had a very large influence on the original movie, and I actually just finished reading a book called George Lucas Interviews, which is curated collection of interviews
Oh,
going
yeah.
all the way back to the early 1970s to 1999,
Yeah.
curated by Sally Klein.
That's a
And
great book.
and everybody knows the story about how they went out to eat after they watched the first very rough assembly cut of Star Wars with the still with the World War II footage in. Spielberg was the only one in the group that said, no, that movie's going to make gangbusters money. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And they get to the point where everybody knows the point in the story where De Palma apparently was just vicious with Lucas. And like Lucas, and the story is always quoted as Lucas just is sinking lower and lower in his chair because De Palma is like a dog with a bone and will not let up on him. And this is the first time where I've seen it cited where like Marsha Lucas never forgave him for it. Like De Palma stopped coming around after that. She was like, even though he did, he helped clean up, a couple of things in the movie and everything. Apparently there was ill will after that moment. And it's the first time I've ever read that acknowledged that there was ill will afterward.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, De Palma did work on some of the dialogue, from what I understand, and the big thing was he rewrote the opening crawl.
Yeah,
along with Jay Cox, who is a screenwriter who wrote things like Strange Days and more recently Silence, but was also the documentarian here on Sisters, which is kind of weird. I guess he's probably just friends with De Palma, like whatever. Yeah, who knows exactly?
Well, I mean, that
works, but
one thing that's for certain is that circle. They were all running together. They were all bouncing ideas off of each other. And, I mean, think about this, okay? Think about this, that Martin Scorsese is working with Marsha Lucas on New York, New York at the time, right? And he didn't show up to the screening. But Marsha Lucas then also, helps edit Star Wars. And New York, New York was supposed to be the one that was the big smash darling hit for that year. Yeah. And instead it's Star Wars that like blows. And in that room, you have Steven Spielberg, you have Brian De Palma, you have Jay Cox, you have, like Scorsese was the only one who wasn't there, basically.
And it's just, was there probably, right?
Like, it's like mind blowing the talent that was in. I mean, you almost think that like Scorsese not being there was almost like that whole, Congress protection clause, like when there's the State of the Union address, like one of you has to stay away from here because
he was the designated survivor.
Right. God help us if that whole room had exploded and Scorsese was in there too. Movies are done. They're over with after that point.
Yeah. But it is great to think that, like at that point in time, there was this sort of like fraternity of young filmmakers, who would all hang out and, were just like, they were the guy. I mean, you kind of like, you hear about that in like other periods of like history in terms of like art and literature, with like, Hemingway hanging out with a bunch of other writers or whatever, or, whoever it is, whoever the artist is. And it's just like, I love that idea that like these guys who, individually were all making like, some of the best movies ever, certainly the best movies of their time. Like they would just hang out and bounce ideas off of each other, help each other out with, their blockbusters or whatever it was. And I mean, that's great. That great collaboration. I mean, the other thing, which, of course everyone knows, is De Palma was, making Carrie at the same time as Star Wars, and they had the big joint casting call for Princess Leia and Carrie, so that they could both try to find their leads.
How different
in
the world
shot.
could have been, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's crazy. But yeah, I don't know. It's it's funny because now we have Rogue One or whatever, which is obviously kind of like an adaptation of that the opening crawl, and De Palma and Jay Cox being the guys who substantially rewrote it. Neil Bulk, who's a music producer, he does like soundtracks and stuff like that. He was on Twitter back when Rogue One came out, and he's like, Brian De Palma and Jay Cox should get story credit for Rogue One.
I
And
think
I'm
he
like,
has a compelling argument.
You're right. That's true.
Yeah.
That is an accurate statement. So, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But cool.
Well, I think any final thoughts on Sisters?
I do think it's really solid. I think that there is a lot of crazy stuff going on, and while all of it doesn't necessarily work, there's so much like outside of the box filmmaking going on, especially with the editing, and Paul Hirsch's contribution, that it's crazy enough to watch. I mean, it's you will not guess what's coming. You will not guess how they get there, and I just think that there's so much sort of weirdness going on that it's really, really worth a look. And I mean, for anyone who's interested in trying to find it, but maybe not wanting to invest in the Criterion collection or whatever, there's a new streaming service called Filmstruck, which is basically like a collaboration with like the Criterion and like Turner Classic Movies or something, and it's on there, and you can do like a free trial, and you can watch it for free. So go ahead and do that. Why not?
Yeah, thanks for the tip, man. That's pretty great. Well, I don't know if I would push anybody to go see this. I think it's a well-made bad movie. But I think that for the stuff, the technical stuff, if you are a fan of, film itself, of the art of putting a film together, it's an interesting watch specifically because you can see, the pieces. You can see the pieces that are in play for it. So, if you want to watch Sisters and then you want to let us know what you thought of it, you can go ahead and you can go to thenerdparty.com/contact. Go ahead, reach out to us. You can select the show, Great Shot Kid. Drop us a line. Let us know what you're thinking. And, we love to interact on the show. If you have a question about Sisters, if you have a question about anything we've talked about, we'll go ahead, we'll address it on the air. So thenerdparty.com/contact. You can also reach us over on the Nerd Party Facebook page at facebook.com/thenerdparty. And you can go ahead and you can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. So those are all of the official channels where they can reach us, Mike. Where can they reach you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, or you can also find me doing commentary track stars on commentarytrackstars.com, or you can find me doing Stage 9 on Trek.fm along with you.
Along with me, yes, along with me. We're on Stage 9. We are exploring the work of Star Trek creators, much the same way we do the Star Wars creators here on Great Shot Kid. And you can also find me co-hosting with Matt right here on the network, Aggressive Negotiations, where we don't look at the work of Star Wars creators. We look at the nooks and crannies of the Star Wars galaxy itself, some of the unexplored regions, as it were. I co-host Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. And you can also find me over on Twitter at Kessel Junkie. And outside of that, we very much thank you for joining us for this edition of Great Shot Kid. So join us next time as we embark on our next great triple feature, where we're going to look at the first movies of the Star Wars spin-off directors.